Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Ever get the feeling that news stories come and go faster than they used to? Ask anyone in the news business. It's real. The O.J. story lasted about a year. Now it feels like there's an O.J. a week. Maybe it's the effect of staring at screens all day, jumping from snippet to snippet. Our brains have been rewired to think only in the present tense. Or maybe there's just a lot more news than there used to be. Some world historic crisis hits every 4 days, knocking the last world historic crisis from our collective consciousness forever. Once upon a time, people had a chance to digest their disasters. The Titanic, for example, sank in April of 1912. In 1982, the New York Times ran a front-page feature about Titanic survivors. 70 years later, people still remembered the story. Can you remember what happened 70 days ago? How about 56 days ago? Think back to that cobweb-shrouded period in our history. It was January of 2019. The federal government had just shut down. The president said we needed a border wall. The Democrats scoffed at him. They claimed the entire immigration crisis was, quote, manufactured. The news media heartily weighed in on that debate. In case you can't remember whose side the media took, here's a clip from our archives.
Folks, the president has manufactured one heck of a political crisis for himself.
Donald Trump is manufacturing a national security crisis.
You will hear them say is that this is a manufactured crisis. It's not a national security crisis.
From Nancy Pelosi down to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or anybody else who will give him a dime for this project.
Because it's manufactured.
It's a manufactured crisis for the president to get a political win.
We have a president who will go on TV tonight and lie and lie and lie some more. This is a manufactured crisis.
All together now. Manufactured crisis. 6 syllables. Learn them, dear robots. Repeat them until they seem plausible. Move on. They'll never remember you lied. And that's exactly what they did. It's what they always do. But reality has an unpleasant habit of reinserting itself into these things. You can dismiss a crisis as manufactured, but that doesn't mean the crisis doesn't exist. In the last month, 76,000 illegal aliens crossed the U.S.-Mexico border. That's the highest number in more than a decade. That's more than the entire population of San Francisco or Boston or Washington, D.C. every single year, coming by foot over just one of our international borders. That is a crisis, manufactured or not. How are the people in charge responding to this crisis? Well, they're still lying. And not just lying, because that's never enough for them. They're lying and sneering at the same time, all with maximum self-righteousness. They're selling us a steaming load of BS and screaming at us for not believing it. Here's young pioneer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez letting you know that if you want your border secured, you're a bad American. The good Americans are the ones trying to sneak into America.
The president should not be asking for more money to an agency that has systematically violated human rights. The president should be really defending why we are funding such an agency at all. Those women and children trying to come here with nothing but the shirts on their back to create an opportunity and to provide for this nation are acting more in an American tradition than this president is right now.
Yeah. They're the real Americans. Well, Ocasio-Cortez expanded on this on Twitter last night. She denounced any Democrat who might be tempted to compromise in any way on immigration. Only open borders are morally acceptable. Quote, where was the concern last week when 26 Democrats voted for a GOP amendment to expand ICE powers rooted in the racist plus false trope that Latino immigrants are more dangerous than U.S.-born citizens? Ocasio-Cortez continued this way, quote, the entire premise of a wall is not based in fact. It's based in a racist plus non-evidence-based trope that immigrants are dangerous. Yet some Dems are willing to compromise and spend billions on a trope because we've accepted some kind of racism as realpolitik in America, end quote. Racist! White supremacist! Anyone who disagrees with me is a Nazi. How tired are you of screeching like this? How boring has it become? Well, not to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She thinks it's fresh and cutting edge. She thinks she's the future. In fact, she's completely out of touch. She has no idea what America is like. Her tiny little world of fair trade coffee shops is thriving. She thinks everyone lives like her. That's how closed her mind is. She is the oldest 29-year-old in history. For millions of other people, the country they grew up in is crumbling. Bad immigration policy is not the only reason for that, but it's a major reason for it. Every year in America, drug overdoses kill more Americans than the entire Vietnam War. Now, one of the main causes of that is fentanyl, much of which is smuggled across the Mexican border. In all of fiscal year 2013, the Fed seized a total of 2 pounds of fentanyl. That's enough to kill 450,000 people. In 2018, last year, Customs seized 1,747 pounds of fentanyl. That is almost 900 times as much. It's enough to kill 396 million people. That's more people than live in the United States and Canada combined. Now, if that bothers you, are you a racist? Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of the morons say, yes, you are. Everyone else understands that borders are what make a country. If you can't control who enters, you are a failed state. Just this morning, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen put it in perspective. She said that illegal arrivals at the Mexican border are set to hit 1 million by the end of this fiscal year. More illegals will come in the first 6 months of 2019 this year than came in all of 2017. That's a crisis. It's also a humanitarian catastrophe.
Today's migrant flows have created a humanitarian catastrophe. In one study, more than 30% of women reported sexual assault along the way, and 70% of all migrants reported experiencing violence. Very unfortunately, because of the increase in violence at ICE, when we have families with children, we have to give every girl a pregnancy test over 10. This is not a safe journey.
Wait, what? It's not safe to walk through the Sonoran Desert? Migrants get raped trying to sneak into America? You must be a racist if you think that. Quick, somebody tell CNN so they can denounce Nielsen as a white supremacist. Someone might believe her otherwise. Meanwhile, the border degrades. Unaccompanied minors keep showing up here. Word has gotten out that almost nobody will ever be deported from this country. Just claim asylum and get released. Everyone in Central America knows this. Why wouldn't they? Since 2000, the number of pending immigration court cases has gone from barely 100,000 to more than 800,000. About 22 million illegal immigrants already live in the United States. That's more people than the populations of 16 U.S. states combined. That is more than the entire New York City metropolitan area, just of people here illegally. But remember, it's not a crisis. It's a guaranteed Democratic majority for the next 100 years. And that's a good thing. Ask CNN. Enrique Acevedo is a Univision anchor, and he joins us tonight. Enrique, thanks very much for coming on. So I think, and my memory, as I age, gets a little bit spottier, but I think you were one of those assuring us this is not a crisis. Looking at the numbers, which I don't think you would contest because they're real, do you want to reassess that? Is it now a crisis?
Well, the first time I came on your show last year, Tucker, I told you that the strategy, the administration strategy, was not working. It was only making things worse. I talked about a humanitarian crisis at the border. You laughed. You told me I was crazy. You told me I was lying and part of this liberal media conspiracy. And here we are 6 months after talking about a humanitarian catastrophe at the border. I said that by doubling down on the same failed policies of the past 50 years, President Trump was only making things worse. Here we are 6 months after talking about a strategy that simply hasn't worked. So that's what's happening at the border, and I hate to say it, but I told you so.
Okay, and you know what? I stand corrected. You said things are bad at the border. I said everything is fine, Enrique. You're a racist. Stop spewing that propaganda.
You talked about a security crisis at the border, Tucker, and there's no security crisis. There's a humanitarian crisis.
Oh, okay. But there's, and for the people involved, it is by definition a humanitarian crisis. They're leaving their failed countries trying to get here. I get it. I've sympathized with them since day one. I still sympathize with them. So we agree on that. But for American citizens, when you have 22 million people living here illegally, that's more than 16 states combined in population, that's a crisis for us. That's what you denied, and I doubt you'll admit it now.
And so that's just an estimate. Another estimate says, and this is, it just depends on which number you want to use. It says that there are half of that, 11 million undocumented people
only
who have been living here for decades.
Only larger than New York City.
Not only, but
I get it. Right. So here's my question to you. How many would constitute a crisis? How many people do we have to let live illegally in our country before we say, you know what, we have to start deporting people? What's the number? Give me a sense, ballpark.
I think there is a crisis. That's not what we're debating. There is a humanitarian crisis at the border, and a wall and limiting the number of people who can claim asylum legally, that's not going to make things better. That's actually going to make things worse. These refugees are turning themselves into Border Patrol agents. They're not running away from Border Patrol agents. You can ask them at the border.
Because they know that the system is a scam, and that's why we have 800,000 pending immigration cases.
You're telling me that children,
right.
7, 8-year-old children and their mothers know that the system is it's working in their favor? They know how the legal system works here in the U.S.?
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying, and you know that that's true. But let me ask you...
And that's the reason why they're coming,
right? Let me
right?
ask you,
not because
they're because their
being victims of violence and extreme poverty.
I've never doubted that.
Even
I've never
climate
doubted
change.
that. I'm an American, and my interest is in my country, which is the United States of America, and I don't believe that having tens of millions of people illegally in your country or using social services is good for my country. It may be good for theirs, it's not good for mine.
Why is it not good for the country?
Living in
what
this
sense
country.
does it make the country worse, Tucker? I would like to know.
It's very simple. It's very simple. When people who are poor come to a country that's getting poorer, right, that country doesn't get richer. And I don't have to guess about that because I've lived here the whole time.
The Rockefellers were very poor when they came to this country. And now they're one of the most celebrated dynasties in the history of the U.S.
Right. That was about 150 years ago. I'm saying right now, the country that we're living in, California,
and that's where the racism argument comes into play. But maybe the problem is that these immigrants are coming from Latin America and that we keep conflating immigration with crime, with terrorism, with economic hardship.
What I'm saying is, well, what I'm saying is that this country
when we talk about immigration, you have images of dangerous gangs. I'm sure this is happening now as we speak.
I'm a racist for wanting to control who comes into my country. The overwhelming majority of our immigration
comes from conflating immigration with crime and terrorism and economic hardship, Tucker. That's not the reality.
I'm not conflating anything.
Every time we talk about immigration on your show, there's a negative connotation to this discussion. There are even negative images illustrating immigrants, like dangerous gangs and
let me ask you
that
really
kind of thing.
Does it take, I'm trying not to use a vulgarity on the air, it takes a lot of chutzpah, doesn't it, to come into someone's country without permission, illegally, break their laws, use their social services, and then whip around and call them racist, which is the game. That kind of takes a lot of guts, doesn't it?
Well, if you put it like that, but I don't think that's what's happening with
them. You're doing that to me right now. I'm a racist.
I'm not using any social services. I'm actually paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, and I don't use any social services because as an immigrant I can't until I become a citizen. You know that, right? Even as a permanent resident, legal resident.
It's been a very generous country for a long time, and this kind of abuse makes Americans more cynical and less generous. And so if you want immigration to continue to enrich this country, you've got to get it under control and let Americans decide who comes and who doesn't. That's it. That's simple. And stop calling them racist because it's very tiresome. It's dumb.
Again, the racism comes from conflating immigration with crime, with terrorism and economic hardship.
You're calling Americans racist because they don't like being invaded. I get it. Enrique, thank you very much.
Thank you.
More on the borders to head. Buck Sexton was just there at the border. Is it a crisis? He would know. We'll talk to him after the break. Well, for months, when it was politically useful to them, all the people on TV told you there was no crisis at the border. The very idea was absurd, and you were a moron for thinking it. Well, now it turns out they were just reciting DNC talking points, which is what they do every single day. So what is actually going on at the border? Buck Sexton was there just a short time ago. He's a former CIA analyst, now with The Hill, and he joins us tonight. Buck, I'm starting to suspect that everything I'm hearing about immigration from the other side is a lie, that there's no good faith at all, that all of it is propaganda. Is that fair?
It's a long series of lies. Walls don't work. We finally figured out, I think, as a country, that's not true. There's no crisis at the border. That's not true. The caravans will never make it to the border. That's not true. Lie after lie after lie that the media has told. But now that we have new data, it's impossible for them to continue to pretend it's not a crisis. So they say it's only a humanitarian crisis. It's actually multiple crises. There is a humanitarian component, no question about it, but that also ties into the national security component because now the cartels make sure that when there's a large group that surrenders at the border in one area, guess what? They run the drugs in a sector that they now know has all the Border Patrol agents tied down. So it directly ties into fentanyl. Methamphetamine, by the way, DEA says maybe at the highest usage ever right now in this country. People even talk about meth usage because the opioid crisis is so bad. And by the way, the numbers that
that's coming from Mexico.
And being made in high-end laboratories in Mexico, laboratories that you would expect for a Pfizer or a big pharma company. They're churning them out. And the big problem here, Tucker, is that it's going to get worse because the laws that we have are such that the people now who show up at the border who have a child are guaranteed to stay. There is no way to change this. I was on your show, actually, that other activist gentleman was on a few months ago, and we had this exchange where it was, why couldn't the entire country of Guatemala just say, well, as long as I have a kid, I'm going to come to the U.S. border and know that I'll get into the United States? Under the law right now, we are testing that theory out. The word is out. The numbers are going to get bigger. And we have no means of stopping this right now unless Congress actually does something, because this is what the law says.
And if you complain about it, you're a bigot. Would any other country put up with this?
Absolutely not. And this is what you really see, and I think this also came up in your last segment, is the Democratic Party is not opposed to illegal immigration. I mean, I think that's pretty
Well, they're not
blatantly
for America. They're actively against America. I mean, I don't think there's any other. I'm a charitable person. It's Ash Wednesday. I want to be a good Christian. But I don't know what other conclusion you reach.
Well, they don't believe in sovereignty. In fact, if you use the word sovereignty now, people in the Democratic Party look at you a little bit strangely. Rule of law, obviously, is largely out the window here. They keep saying, they play this game of, if you surrender, you're seeking asylum. Well, as we know, people within 24 hours often now, because they've overwhelmed the system. And this is intentional. We also know this from Border Patrol. They have been told. They have seen this themselves. People are now showing up. They know the system. They know the game. And if they have a kid with them, guess what? They're going to be on a plane, in many cases, to wherever they want in the United States, never to be seen again by U.S. authorities. So that's also very different. When people were playing this game, this is another lie, Tucker, about how the numbers aren't as bad now as they used to be. Well, the numbers in 2005, the 1990s, when that was a particular surge of illegal immigration, a lot of those people were being deported back to Mexico right away. It was really a catch and release back into Mexico often, whereas now these other than Mexican, OTM is what they call them, when they get to the border, they can't be sent immediately and deported back into Mexico, so they get released in the interior of the United States, and no serious person thinks they're going to be deported. This is an open-door policy. If you have a kid, we have an open border right now if you come from a non-contiguous country and you show up and say, I want to stay. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
Crazy. And if you tolerate it, you clearly... You know, it's a hostile act against the country. I don't see any other way to read it. Buck Sexton, thank you so much. Great to see you, as always. Tom Homan is former acting director of ICE. He knows a lot about this. He joins us tonight. Tom, thanks very much for coming on. So the argument, to the extent you can call it that, from the other side is often, look, the details don't matter. What matters is that the Trump administration has constructed cages, and they'll get teary as they tell you this, into which, for reasons of racism, it is throwing Latin American children and letting them languish.
Well,
is that true?
No, it's not true. And I watched the hearing today, and I respect Chairman Bernie Thompson, but he accused the Secretary of misleading the American people and misleading the committee. He is misleading the American people because, first of all, they're not cages, all right? They're chain link dividers, go all the way up to high ceiling, that separate children from unrelated adults. If we didn't do that back in 2014 and 15 when they were built, then the first child gets molested by an unrelated adult, what happens? Now they were under investigation for that. So these are chain link fences separating vulnerable populations, unrelated adults.
I'm confused. They were built in 2014 and 15. Trump wasn't president then.
Barack Obama was president. I was there when they were built. These cages, they want to call them, but these facilities where we house families were built under President Obama and Secretary Johnson. I was there when they were constructed. Did
Democrats say anything about it?
They absolutely did not raise hell back then, but now all of a sudden it's a terrible thing. And they yell about family detention and locking families up in a family residential center. When President Barack Obama was president, we had 100 family detention beds. Under his administration, we built 3,000 more. I built them. So for the Democrats to mislead the American people saying these are Trump's cages and we're locking families up, first of all, they're treated very well. They're treated a lot better now than they've ever have been. But these facilities, without a doubt, were built under Obama administration because I was there when they were built. And it's very easy. The Democrats, they want to investigate it. FOIA the acquisitions paperwork. FOIA when these facilities were built. It's clear when they were built, 2014, 2015.
Well, why does I mean, Democrats obviously have their own motives for not saying that. They're a political party. But why wouldn't people who are reporting on this for a living make that clear, that we've had these since the last administration, like them or not? I mean, that's the fact. I've never heard that.
I'm not a politician, and I'm not running for office. I'm a career cop for 34 years. I just can state facts. But as a citizen, the media is anti-Trump. Look, I think the story is 90% of stories are anti-Trump. The Democrats, they know the border's out of control. Anybody who doesn't recognize that is just ignoring the facts. But their hatred for Trump is more important than their responsibility to protect our nation, protect our borders. That's just a stone cold fact, and it's unfortunate. I've never seen anything like this in my 34 years of doing this job. It's incredible.
Quickly, drill down on that. What do you mean you've never seen anything like this?
I've never seen our representatives elected by the people to defend this nation, to ignore the very sovereignty of this nation. This is not a nation without borders. It's not only about enforcing laws that they enacted. ICE and Border Patrol is doing nothing. They're not making any of this stuff up. They're enforcing laws that Congress enacted, but Congress will rather vilify the men and women of ICE for enforcing their laws and them making changes in the law if they don't like them. I've worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. I respect every president I work for because I respect the office of the presidency.
Yes.
That is no longer around. I mean, there are people, President Trump is our elected president, elected by the people of this country because of the issues that he thinks are important to this country. He's trying to fulfill those promises, and he's hated by the other party for it. This is not the America I grew up in. It's certainly not the America that we should be in, and I'm hoping we finally got a president who believes in getting that America back, that you don't kneel for the national anthem. You serve your country, and you serve it proudly, and I just... In my 34 years, I've never seen anything like it. When I watched the hearing today, it was theater. It's not getting to the facts of family tension and zero tolerance and family separation and the issues they want to bury today. This was theater. This is theater.
They don't care, and it must be extremely frustrating to someone who spent his life working on this. Tom Homan, thank you very much for that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
It's more obvious by the day that Democrats will make a push to impeach the president. Obviously, they're going to. Some party veterans, Democratic Party veterans, are warning that's not a good idea. We'll explain that next with Dana Perino.
This deplorable, despicable human being that occupies the White House should not be there. They say, Maxine, please don't say impeachment anymore. And when they say that, I say impeachment, impeachment, impeachment.
Well, just last year, Democratic leaders told us that impeachment was not on the agenda. Nobody believed them. Now, impeachment might be the only thing that can hold together their fractured, outraged party. Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York concedes impeachment is coming, even though evidence to support it has not yet been found, but will be.
Do you think the president obstructed justice?
Yes, I do.
If that's the case, then is the decision not to pursue impeachment right now simply political, if you believe he obstructed justice?
No, we have to do the investigations and get all this. We do not now have the evidence all sorted out and everything to do an impeachment. Before you impeach somebody, you have to persuade the American public that it ought to happen.
Some Democrats, though, are warning that an impeachment trial could damage the Democratic Party, and that's bad because the Democratic Party is the most important thing, always. David Axelrod warned on Twitter that a recent wave of more than 80 Democratic subpoenas, quote, too easily plays into the witch hunt meme. Longtime Clinton family aide Greg Hale tweeted this, quote, please don't do it. Please don't impeach him. It won't help us win in 2020. He deserves it. I believe that. But what's the best long-term play for the country? Question mark. Dana Perino hosts the Daily Briefing, of course, one of our favorite people in the building. She joins us tonight. So, double question.
Okay.
Will the president be impeached by Democrats? And will, if that happens, that trial hurt the Democratic Party?
Well, I think if they do it, of course, yes, I think they all know that it's going to hurt the Democratic Party. That's why you see people like David Axelrod and Greg Hale, and there's others saying, right. Whoa, 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 like, they got to tap the brakes. But I think what's happening now, Tucker, there's 3 types of Democrats. First, you have people like Chairman Nadler. He is in a very safe district. He's an old bull of the Congress. He's been chomping at the bit to have the gavel back. And he pays no political price in his district because he's going to win again. And also, he has a way to keep the base happy. Then you've got a second group, which are the freshmen. They won in very tough districts, right? They're in 40 seats. Most of those were in Republican-held districts that could easily be switched back in 2020 to Republicans because that's how swing districts work. And they don't want to talk about this. They want to show that they can govern on important issues like infrastructure, health care, et cetera. And the third group are your presidential candidates. And they have to keep the base happy enough, talking impeachment, but they also have to look long-term to a general election where impeachment doesn't work. And just last week, Axios said that all of the candidates that go to Iowa right now, they're not talking about Trump, they're not talking about Mueller, they're not talking about Russia, they don't talk impeachment. They don't want to talk about it. So they're in a little bit of a box because the base wants it. The old guard knows that it shouldn't happen, but sometimes it's inevitable that you have people like Jerry Nadler who say, I've got the gavel, I'm going to use it.
I wonder if insurgents like Ocasio-Cortez could do to the Democrats what Trump did to the Republicans, which is just outflank them and use social media to do it, demand that they live up to their promises, which in effect are to impeach Trump. They call him a criminal. How can you not impeach him? I mean, could they force the party to do it?
Well, sure, like they could get mad at the establishment, right? They could say, what are you afraid of? Like, why can't you do this? And they'll be like, well, you know what, you have to stay in power. We have to be able to do this correctly. But here's the other thing, is that President Trump does better when he has a foil, when he has someone to go up against.
Right.
And the House Democrats are now that foil. It's not just Pelosi, right? He seems to actually kind of get along and even respect Nancy Pelosi. But the others, like the left, now he has something to push back against. So, again, you get to 2020, an election, not a midterm, it's not a referendum on the president. It's a choice between two people. And just like what happened with Bill Clinton in 1998, right, his popularity went up when the Republicans tried to impeach him.
Right. And
Republicans
actually lost seats in that midterm, which is, I think it's only happened twice in 100 years, and that was definitely one of them. So finally, quick, do you think it's possible that the leaders of the Democratic Party, Pelosi, for example, keep this contained?
I think it'll be very difficult, and I think if you look at the debate that the House Democrats are having just right now about whether to have a resolution on the floor to condemn anti-Semitism, like they can't even do that, right? So who is really the leader of the Democratic Party right now?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to laugh. It's just
I know you're not laughing at me.
Calling everyone else immoral can't pass a resolution against anti-Semitism?
It's a really hard, it's a tough choice.
It tells you a lot. Dana Perino, it is never tough to talk to you. It's always a pleasure.
Love seeing you. Thanks, Tucker.
Thank you. Fox News alert for you. We have exclusive new details tonight on this show about the case of conservative activist Hayden Williams. He was attacked, you might remember, while trying to recruit conservatives at UC Berkeley. Harmeet Dillon is an attorney. She represents Williams, and she joins us tonight with the latest. Harmeet, thanks a lot for coming on. So this was caught on tape. It should be fairly straightforward. What do we know?
Well, Zachary Greenberg, who is not a student at UC Berkeley but sort of floats around on the campus, assaulted Hayden Williams on the video that has gone viral all over the country without provocation. He cold-cocked him, and Hayden has sustained injuries to his face as a result of that and his phone. So after about 10 days, the police did arrest Mr. Greenberg, and he was arraigned in court today on 3 felony charges of assault, battery, violent threats, and then also a destruction of the phone as a misdemeanor. And he pled not guilty. So that's what happened in court today. There'll be an upcoming court date in about a month for a preliminary hearing. And it'll be interesting to see what his defense is, because it is very clearly him on the video, so he must have something else in mind in terms of his defense. But he has a private attorney, not a public defender. And I've done some digging, and I've learned a few other interesting facts about Mr. Greenberg and his history with the court system.
So give us a flavor of what those might be.
So Mr. Greenberg, over the past couple of years, has had numerous incidents where he's filed restraining orders against his roommates in multiple group houses and then moved out of those group houses. His roommates have put in evidence that has been more believable and believed by the court that none of those incidents happened. He's also had a restraining order filed against him by a former roommate, which was granted by a court. And as a result of that restraining order, he had to turn in his guns to the authorities. He has filed several lawsuits against landlords for charges that were later dismissed by the court and found not to be valid. And he has filed small claims against roommates, again, found not to be sustained for the most part. And so, like almost a dozen lawsuits that I've uncovered that this man is involved in. And interestingly, Tucker, this is a tactic, actually, that I've seen used in another case involving a Berkeley violent activist. So you've had Yvette Falarka on your show.
We sure
and
have.
Falarka has filed false restraining orders against conservatives on the Berkeley campus. That there's a case that I'm involved in that's now in the Court of Appeals on that, where we defeated a false restraining order by her. So I think this is one of the growing tactics of the left, potentially, is doing this. And he does this with fee waivers. So he isn't paying the fees, claiming that he's indigent. And he has no visible means of support, but his lawyer told the reporters today outside the courtroom that he was on the campus studying in the library, but not as a Berkeley student but studying somewhere else. So there is a lot yet to be known about this guy, what motivated him, but clearly he has anger issues. One of the people in the lawsuits described, marijuana use, and certainly there's a gun, at least one gun involved in his possession. And so a lot more to be asked about this guy and, how he has private counsel and why is he pleading not guilty. So, we'll see what happens.
He's got a private lawyer. Another angry rich kid. There are an awful lot of those on the left, as you know. Harmeet Dillon, great to see you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The actor Will Smith is being attacked for his latest film role. His critics say, literally, he has the wrong skin color. We thought that attitude disappeared 50 years ago. It lives on the left. That story is straight ahead. You may have learned in school that the hallmark of an authoritarian regime is banning books. Remember when all the librarians, mostly liberal, would have banned book week? These are all the books the bad guys don't want you to read. Here they are. And they had a point. The Inquisition burned books. So did the Nazis. Corrupt regimes everywhere fear the free exchange of ideas, and they won't tolerate it if they don't have to. The best sign of America's strength is that we are, and we have always been, different. We don't fear and suppress other people's ideas, even if they are offensive or unpopular. We combat them with better ideas. That's how we've always been. But that is changing fast. Increasingly, the norm in America is that some people shouldn't be allowed to speak and some views are not allowed. Judge Amy Jackson, who is an actual judge, is now threatening Roger Stone with prison time because he wrote a new introduction to his book that says unflattering things about Robert Mueller. That is now a crime, according to Judge Amy Jackson. Amazon, which completely and utterly dominates the book sales market around the world, just banned a book by British activist Tommy Robinson because the book is critical of Islam. By the way, books criticizing Christianity are still in abundant supply on Amazon. But Amazon didn't just refuse to sell Robinson's book. They banned users from selling used copies of it secondhand. Amazon's crackdown is part of a much wider effort. Facebook shut down Tommy Robinson's page. YouTube banned him. People vastly richer and more powerful than you, richer and more powerful than any of us, want you to know that whatever Robinson is saying is evil and wrong. And maybe it is. I don't even know what he's saying. It doesn't matter. They don't want you to read or decide for yourself. That's the point. The old left, the legitimate left, the left that had integrity, would have been horrified by this. Now they don't care. They're in favor of it. The Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, it's his vanity site, his unregistered lobbying arm, has not even covered the Robinson book ban. They're part of the censorship class themselves. Democracy dies in darkness. They're imposing darkness. That's what book banning is. Well, there's nothing more popular on the left than calling other people racist, but sometimes that's hard. How do you accuse someone of being racist against his own race? Well, you accuse them of colorism instead. We're not making that up. Actor Will Smith was just cast in the movie King Richard as Richard Williams, father of tennis legends Venus and Serena Williams. But social media critics are melting down. They claim that Will Smith is too light-skinned for that role. Danielle Greenbaum is senior contributor at The Federalist and a columnist at The Spectator USA, and she joins us tonight. So, Danielle, this argument that people's moral value can be discerned by the color of their skin, wasn't that the core argument of the segregationists in the American South?
It was. And actually, Tucker, you and I discussed this summer with the Scarlett Johansson controversy. We're seeing over and over again that the activist mob is deciding that whether you get to play a role in a movie has nothing to do with your skill, but is rather just about what you look like.
But, I mean, I've got a bunch of kids. I went to school in this country myself. From the first grade all the way through college, you are taught correctly that one of the great sins in American history was Jim Crow, which was a very elaborate system based on exactly this precept. Your value corresponds to your skin color.
Right.
How can the people who claim to be against Jim Crow make this case?
They can't, or they shouldn't, but they're trying to. And it's a total slap in the face to anyone who's fought for equality and who's fought to have a society in which we don't judge people on the color of their skin.
So to get to the specifics of this case, they're saying that Will Smith is not black enough, or I hate even to say it, it's so disgusting, but that he's somehow the wrong color. How is he responding to this?
You know, that's exactly what they're saying, as if they've brought, you know, a tape color up to his skin and are saying, you're one too many shades too far removed from what the person you're supposed to portray is actually looks like. And so far, I think he's kind of seems to be standing his ground. I hope he doesn't follow the path that has been set out before him by other actors who have cowed to the mob and said, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I've clearly crossed a line. I've clearly done something that polite society doesn't do. I think he brings a lot to any role. I think he's a great actor, and I think he's one that brings audiences, and that's probably part of why he was chosen. So I think it'll be a real shame if he kind of gives in to the pressure that he's currently facing.
Has anybody stood up and said, wait, this is insane, we've become what we said we hated, we're the problem? Has anyone sort of turned the lens inward and admitted the rot at the very core of the modern left on the question of race?
I would be so pleased to see that. I haven't seen that piece, certainly not out of the left. And it's exactly what you just said. It's the modern left. The historical left would be so disturbed by this argument. They would be aghast that we're once again totally judging people and putting them into boxes based on not just now the color of their skin, but the precise shade of their skin. But unfortunately, the left of today is one that actually loves to judge people based on their identity.
Yeah, and you know that because they're the ones calling other people racist. Will Smith is the wrong color. You shouldn't have a job. You're a racist. Like, self-awareness is in short supply. Danielle, thank you. You were great. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Well, Democrats have told us for a couple of years that the 2016 election was rigged by Vladimir Putin, the arch bad guy of all time. So, shouldn't they be demanding that Hillary Clinton run again to claim her rightful post as president of the United States? But they're not. That's interesting, and we'll investigate it after the break.
On Fox Nation right now.
So, as we've told you a couple of times in the show, Michael Cohen the other day basically shut down the entire Russia investigation definitively by saying under oath that no, there was no collusion. And by the way, he would know. It doesn't matter. It is still an article of faith on the left that the last presidential election was rigged by that dastardly Vladimir Putin and his secret Facebook agents, some of them from Macedonia. Anna Navarro, who works at a bunch of different networks, amazingly, repeated that claim just yesterday.
Trump campaign and the Trump world they are experts at pre-gaming and at spinning. And yes, remember when they talked about everything being rigged? Turns out they were right. Everything was rigged. It was rigged for them. They had the help of the Russians.
So you got to wonder, at a time when, I mean, I don't care what they say about the unemployment rate, our labor force participation rate is appalling. There are millions of people who want to work who aren't working, should be working, and Anna Navarro has like 3 different jobs. How do we wind up with a country like that? Anyway, but she's not alone. There are lots of other people, too. Democratic lawmakers and media adjuncts, their water carriers, often tell you the last presidential election was stolen.
The Russians exploited a massive backdoor into the foundation of our democracy.
The work by Russian agents to try to destabilize American democracy.
It's everything you need to know about the threat to our democracy.
Responding to Russia's assault on our democracy should be a bipartisan issue.
There is no question that Russia attacked us.
Or attacks, ladies and gentlemen, on our Constitution.
Attack on the integrity of our elections.
An attack on our democracy.
The first time we've had an adversary attack us that we have not responded.
So Don Lemon said it. They stole it from Hillary. The Russians did, and Hillary certainly thinks that. She should be president right now, according to them. So if that's true, why does nobody seem especially eager for Hillary to run for president again? People seem to sigh a deep, deep sigh of relief on Monday when she said she isn't running again in 2020, when her aides walked that back a day later and said she could still run. Nobody was excited. Even on the left, Clinton's continued presence triggers groans more than applause. But why is that? She was robbed in 2016. She's a martyr. Why shouldn't she come forth to claim her rightful place on the American throne? We asked that question of Quentin James. He's founder of the Collective PAC, and he joins us tonight. Well, thanks a lot for coming on. So, super simple. I just want to take the claim at face value. Putin stole it from this poor woman. Yes, she's rich and famous, and she's got her own plane. But I feel bad for her because she should be president. So why aren't Democrats encouraging her to run again?
Thanks for having me on, Tucker. Listen, I don't think folks are saying that they don't want her to be president. Hillary Clinton has said that, and so they're very much taking her lead. She has stepped up to found a new organization, Onward Together, that is supporting a new generation of Democratic activists and progressive kind of movement leaders. And so this isn't really about rehashing 2016. I think what we are calling for, though, is for Trump to be held accountable to what we did see happen in 2016 with Russian interference in our election. Every intelligence agency in this country has said that Russia influenced our election. Why is our president running away from this investigation, running away from finding out the truth? That's the question I think that's before all of us.
You know, I know. It's about crushing Trump. I get it. It's been going on a couple of years now, and I know that Coast Guard intelligence is on board with the fact the Russians did that. But if you really believe
and the CIA and the NSA.
Whatever, okay, yeah. I mean, they're totally nonspecific about. I mean, what does that mean? They never told us what it means, actually, and so I still don't know.
That's why Robert Mueller is still investigating. We are waiting for his investigation to be over.
Absolutely, and we're waiting with bated breath. But there's a victim in this crime, if it was in fact a crime, as you allege, and that's Hillary Clinton, and she should be president, and she's not because of those darn Russians. So why is nobody making any effort to make it right, to make her president again? How in the world can Kamala Harris, who was not the victim of a Russian plot, how can she step up and try to be president when Hillary Clinton still strides the earth? I'm serious.
But Tucker, making it right isn't putting her on the ballot again. This would be, again, her third time running for president.
She won last time. You already told me that. She won, but the Russians stole it from her.
She did receive 3 million more votes than Donald Trump.
Well then,
yes, that is fact.
Then I'm
confused. She has said she does not want to run for president again. And so let's take her word and her lead for that. Let's move on as a party, which we've been doing.
Wait, hold on. So, but if she came out tomorrow and said, actually, I want to be president, you'd be, of course, all in behind her, right? Every Democrat would be. How could you take someone who had it stolen from her and not endorse her?
Listen, Hillary Clinton is one of the most accomplished public servants in American history. If she wanted to run for president, I'm sure that our party would welcome her into the race.
Would you welcome her? Would you say to Kamala Harris, come on, she just had it stolen from her.
Listen,
look, I'm playing games with you. You know the truth, which is no one thinks it was stolen from her. They all look down on her. She's the past. They have zero interest in her running. And if she announced tomorrow, you would attack her, and you know that.
Who would attack her? No, Tucker. This, again, is one of the most accomplished public servants of either party in American history.
She's not accomplished
If she wanted to run, she deserves every right to do so. But what we know is that for some reason, Vladimir Putin and the Russians did not want her to be president in 2016.
Because they feared her, because they don't like strong women, right?
We still do not know why
in addition
Donald
to being
Trump and the Republican Party accepted their help. 34 individuals in the Trump orbit have been indicted or charged in some form or fashion with the Mueller investigation. We don't know where this is going to end. And so we can talk about Hillary Clinton, or we can talk about the truth of why Russia interfered in our election.
Hilarious. It's hilarious. I mean, not a single American.
But it's factual, though. That's the challenge.
It's literally not factual. Not a single American has been indicted. No. Not a single American. Not one. And if I'm wrong, tell me who that person is, because I missed the news.
I'm pretty sure there have been 12 people directly who were associates of Donald Trump's campaign.
Yeah,
I'm
sure that's true. But not one of them for affecting the outcome of 2016. That's not even been alleged by Robert Mueller or any prosecution.
Not yet. We're not done with the investigation, Tucker. We don't know where this is going to go.
Yet. Okay, super quick. We've only got 10 seconds left.
Sure.
If it turns out that Mueller says, yes, there was collusion, will you demand that Hillary Clinton take her place on the throne?
Listen, that would be a question of constitutional changes around how do we replace a president, right? So obviously, if Donald Trump is impeached, we're looking at Mike Pence becoming president.
Look, her
if he's
husband
impeached,
was president,
then Nancy Pelosi.
she has a right to be president. That's always
Come on now. No one's calling for anarchy here, Tucker.
Okay. Quentin James, thank you very much. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
I wish we could go on forever, but we can't. We're limited by the laws of physics. Our hour is done. We'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. The show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Sean Hannity is live from New York.
All right, Tucker, great.